Okay, welcome everyone to our channel. We have a very special and highly respected guest with us today, Mr. Patrick Wood. Patrick is a leading author, speaker, and researcher on the critical topic of technocracy and the editor of the fantastic resource, technocracy.news. For decades, he has been at the forefront of exposing the historical roots and modern-day implication of this agenda for our freedom and humanity. Patrick, it's a real honor and pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so
You
much.
bet. Yeah, I'm my pleasure for sure.
Thank you. So, Mr. Wood, please take us back to technocracy's origins in the 1930s as the science of social engineering. What was the main goal and how the founders planned to run this kind of society? And most importantly, what was the philosophy at the base of this movement?
Wow, that's a tall order. uh, well, number one, the basic philosophy that underlied technocracy was scientism. That was something that was invented philosophically in the 1800s, mostly by a French philosopher by the name of Henri de Saint-Simon. And he proposed that society should be run by a cast of engineers and scientists. And he basically said, well, science needs to be elevated to be God. And that God would have a priesthood of engineers and scientists who would somehow interpret what science said and then bring it down to the people so that they can obey. You see, that was a very elitist thought in the 1800s for sure, but that was just at the beginning of the scientific revolution. So they had some idea that something was going on at that point, and they had a high regard for science in general at that point, obviously. When technocracy itself got started in the 20s and then the early 30s, it was basically the same proposition. They didn't necessarily say that they were following scientism per se, but that's what it was, nevertheless. So when they set up this crazy idea that somehow these engineers and scientists at Columbia University, and especially, they thought that the economic system of the world was kaput at that point, and there's a Great Depression, and certainly people were angry with the politicians. They blamed the politician and the bankers on it, and so these engineers and scientists at Columbia University thought they could do better. They could do a scientific economic system, and basically the idea would be to manage all the resources in society, including people, to achieve a balance of everything, an efficiency, if you will, across the whole system. And we'll talk about just that philosophy in just a second. But I wanted to point out that this was a totally mechanistic view of the universe and humans as well. When I say human, when I talk about mechanistic, based on science, they thought that if they could just analyze everything that they could get their hands on, including the data and even driving down to the molecular level, they figured if they can figure all that stuff out, well, they can figure out how the universe works, and they can figure out how the mind of man works. And they thought there would always be a scientific solution, no matter what the problem. Mm-hmm. Well, we see this type of thinking today all over the place. There's no place for any other worldview other than mechanism at this point. It doesn't matter if you follow any religion in the world, Christianity, the Bible, or whatever. It doesn't matter. That those thinking systems are not. They're excluded from technocracy wholesale. Mm-hmm. And we see this, for instance, when in modern context, where this business of when Obama created this initiative in America called the Brain Initiative, he wanted to map the human brain. And he thought, well, if we put hundreds of millions of dollars against it, and we get all the scientists in the world working on this problem, we can map the human brain. And here we are, 12 years later, they've spent billions of dollars at this point trying to figure out how the brain works. They've drilled down into the synapses and the molecules and everything in your brain. They still don't have a clue what consciousness is, for instance. They can't get it. They don't understand how emotions work, for instance. Why do you fall in love with somebody? You can't answer that question scientifically. So the business of a mechanistic worldview is at the heart of all of this today. I'll go back to 1932 again, at Columbia University. By the time there had been several years kind of a ramp up to 1932, but when the whole project was presented to Columbia University, the chancellor of Columbia University at that time, his name was Butler, and he thought this would be the progressive thing to do. Progressivism was the thing in that day. Everybody had something to do with progressive anything, but Columbia was the seat of progressivism in our country.
Yes.
And so he thought, well, this would be a great way for us as a university to be at the front of this. And so he gave them the movement the use of Hamilton Hall, they had a basement at that point, a full footprint basement, and he gave them one half of that basement space to house their project. They had brought a lot of people around in from other places as well, but they were all technocrats and they were working on a particular project. But the other half of that, the basement, was occupied by the early iteration of IBM. That was where the first tabulator was made, in that space. By the way, the archives have disappeared at this point from Columbia University, talking about what happened, and all the papers were there. There was a huge store of information, but it all disappeared from the archival warehouse at Columbia without a trace. Nobody has a clue where it went.
Very conveniently.
Oh, yes. IBM, as you know, was very instrumental in Nazi Germany when they shipped all their computers or tabulators to Germany, and with technicians attached and with supplies to run the tabulators, the punch cards, etc. And the history is well, we know a lot about the history of it, but that archive at Columbia has been disappeared in the meantime. So we don't have anything on it now. But all that to say, those visionaries from IBM were working with the top scientists and engineers at Columbia to cross-pollinate ideas about technocracy. In other words, the technocrats were interfacing with the brainiacs of the computer industry, and together they had an idea. Well, this is where the world is going to go. The world's going to go into this mechanistic worldview, and they're going to basically manage all the resources in society. And they had a crackpot scheme for sure. They didn't want any private property. You would not have any property at all. They wanted to give everybody a universal basic income. We see this today all over the place because now AI is going to replace all the jobs, et cetera. So we have to give everybody universal basic income. Well, that was was going on in 1932. And when they talk about property rights, especially, this is something that's very concerning. I think it's sort of a dull topic, but basically, Western civilization is based on private property.
Absolutely.
All of us. It doesn't matter where you live at this point. You're in, even in China, in Russia, in Europe, in the Mideast. Doesn't matter, and in the United States certainly. Private property is like fundamental to any sense of liberty and freedom. They said at that point in 1932, no, private property is stupid, and the people could not be trusted with resources. So basically, everybody would be removed from their property, and even though they might still live in the same house, they have to rent it now, and it'll be under the control of the technate. And so basically, because you have a universal basic income, you couldn't save money to buy anything. Even your currency was set to expire at the end of a period, the allocation period they call it. And if you ran out of money or ran out of energy script at that point, well, tough luck. You have to mooch off somebody. And if you had some left over at the end of a period, they just dissipated. They just wiped them out. So you couldn't get ahead. You couldn't save money. You would have no things to buy. You would not be able to buy property at that point. There'd be no property for sale, right?
Yes.
And everything would be managed for you, cradle to grave. With all of your needs met, they said, and it was as a crazy system that they dreamed up. There's other aspects you can see today with for instance, with all of the movement, the push to drive automobiles out of society, and at least in our country, I think is happening in Europe as well, to ban private automobiles and move people into mass transit or other types of Waymo cars or Teslas or whatever that do the driving for you, and basically you rent a share of them when you need to go somewhere. Well, this scheme was hatched in the first place in 1932 with the Technocracy movement. They wanted to have just a few models of cars and trucks in the whole society, and nobody would own anything at that point. No private automobiles at all. But you can go to the garage, they called them, and you could rent a car to get you from point A to point B. And when you got to your destination, well, you return it to another garage there, and you'd stay a day to 2 days, whatever, a week at your destination. Then you'd rent another car to get back. Mm-hmm. Well, this they never had said that how that was really work out, but the craziness of it is just to give you an idea how controlling these people were. If you rented your car from one garage and you went to your destination and you parked your car like out in the front of the house or whatever, and you left it there for a day or some period, they would charge you an extra fee for leaving the car in the front of the house instead of putting it back in the garage, in the pool, if you will, so that somebody else could get a hold of it.
Mhm.
So they didn't care how many miles you put on the car necessarily, but you're going to get a surcharge if you do not put it back in the pool when you got exactly where you got to go in the first place. This is absolutely insane.
So
Would have
it also has an element of like a behavioral conditioning.
totally, totally. You have to do what they say to do, or else. This is where social engineering comes in, by the way,
Yes.
because they understood the problem that humans had. Humans are not like machines. They're not like the cars. They're not like the factory machines, whatever. They can design those things to work all the time perfectly. But the people that have to run these things and the people in the society, well, they they like to get in fights with each other, and they get sick. Um, you politically, they're all over the place, arguing with each other. Uh, they figure, well, this is all bad, people. You need to be managed, and so they invented this idea of the science of social engineering. Now, you can't argue philosophically the social engineering, in other words, the conditioning of man. That's not really a science in the first place, because it's not predictable. It can't falsify it. So, but nevertheless, they said, we're going to have this science of social engineering so we can put everybody in a channel and make them do what we want them to do. And this was beyond, by the way, just the elements of Skinnerism, and
Pavlov.
with his, pecking pigeons, and with Pavlov with his dogs, and propaganda with Edward Bernays, for instance. This was beyond that. Oh, that was bad enough by itself, but it's morphed now into the science of social engineering. It's morphed now into literally a science of human manipulation, where people can be manipulated now en masse to form a column, to go in one direction, another direction, whatever, and they can do this now with increasing accuracy and prediction. We see this with AI and social media, for instance, all over the place now, and everybody's talking about it openly.
Mhm.
How social media can manipulate people into some type of behavior. But then you also have, on the other side, you have the military establishment is working with, in our country anyway, with organizations like IARPA and DARPA for military applications of this science of social engineering,
Mhm.
to literally invade the mind of people and do harm, plant thoughts, read thoughts, scramble scramble eggs.
That's cognitive warfare, correct?
Exactly
Mhm.
so. Yeah. So, in any case, you see this going forward from there. You can see the science of social engineering has bloomed all over the place at this point, and this is basically this is a pillar of technocracy today. If they cannot manipulate us as people, we would be a risk to them to overthrow them with their projects.
I understand. And what happened to this movement? Because I understand that they showed up again in the 70s, especially with the Trilateral Commission and Rockefeller and Brzezinski. Um, so, what made them go away in the 30s? And also, if I remember correctly, they were kicked out of from Colombia, and eventually they showed up in the 70s. So, what happened
Yes.
during those times? And maybe you can explain to us about the Trilateral and all those other think tanks which are responsible for their resurfacing.
You bet. The reason they got got kicked out of Columbia in the first place because the founder of the movement, Howard Scott, he wasn't only founder, but he was the guy that had his mouth was open all the time, the promoter, right?
Yeah.
He was found to be a fraud because he misrepresented in himself to Columbia University that he was like a PhD scientist or engineer, and he had lots of credentials, he said, but people checked him out, couldn't find where he went to college, where he got his degrees from, whatever. And so Columbia got really ticked off at him and said, you're out of here. All of you, the whole movement got kicked out at that point. And it was reformed within 6 months as Technocracy Incorporated. That was a private organization, a membership organization. They collected dues, and if you had your card, why you can go to their member meetings around the country, and it was big in Canada and the United States as well. And so the membership organization, it went forward, had a lot of members, like over 500,000 in America alone. That was pretty good back then. That was a large group of people for sure. But they never got any institutional money. They didn't get anything from the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, and the trusts that were set up at that point for social projects or whatever. They couldn't get traction to get money. If they had got money, it would probably have a different outcome. But the other thing that they were criticized, even from people in the movement, is that they didn't have any political idea or a political strategy to conquer the political system to bring in technocracy. They tried a frontal assault with FDR that's Roosevelt, when he was elected in 1933. They encouraged him, the technocrats did, in writing, by the way. They encouraged him to declare himself dictator and simply appoint top to bottom technocrats to run the country, the whole thing. They even created an organizational chart, just like a modern corporation would have today. President, chairman, president, vice presidents, and division managers, etc. And fortunately, FDR didn't take him up on that. That would have been ugly as well. But I think FDR had more political sense than to declare himself the dictator. He was not a technocrat. He was not an engineer. And if they had got their way, he would be the first guy to get thrown under the bus for sure. So anyway, that was one thing that struck against them at that point, and to kind of get them out of the limelight. But there was another thing that was important as well. They had no political strategy going forward on how they could interface with anything political, to the point where Howard Scott laid out a rule: if you were a politician, you could not join the technocracy movement. They wouldn't give you a card. You couldn't pay dues. Doesn't matter what you did, they would kick you out if they found you out. And you were not allowed to go to the technocracy meetings around the country to learn what the thing is all about. So you can see they really hated the politicians in that day. They didn't want anything to do with them. And it was kind of Pollyannish on their part to think that somehow they could just ascend because science says so. Okay, well, I see this attitude even today, but now there's a political philosophy wrapped around technocracy that is probably getting a lot of traction today. But when Brzezinski came along in 1968, when he started writing his book that was called America's Role in the Technotronic Era. It's called Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. He was a professor at Columbia University at that point, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Columbia University in 1932, Columbia University in 1968. How many years is that? Well, not too many. And all of these old technocrats who were running around at Columbia, the engineers and scientists that were involved with the first movement, who were they were forbidden to talk about technocracy because the whole movement got thrown out in the first place, so they couldn't talk about it. But you know that philosophy stuck around. When Brzezinski saw it, he said, "I'm going to write a book about this," and that became his Technotronic Era. That was a point where Rockefeller got the idea. Rockefeller was a money man, primarily at that point. He was the chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank. And Rockefeller's, his problem was that he knew that money someday would have to be burned up because the system was not sustainable. But if you had all the resources in your under control, if you had the resources in your pocket, and everybody needs resources, whatever, lumber, gold, oil, name it, everything comes from the ground eventually. So if he could somehow figure out a way to get all the resources under his control, then it doesn't matter what kind of money you have. You can use beads. It doesn't matter. You say you want something. Well, let's barter here. How about your firstborn or something? So anyway, this is why I think Rockefeller saw the possibility that technocracy could deliver to him the resources of the world and get them into his pocket and his cronies' pockets to micromanage everything in sight. And that's really where modern globalization started, in my opinion. Very strong. I very strongly believe that was the point where modern globalization started, with this crazy idea going forward from there that the new economic system that would be fashioned would be based on technocracy, all of the micromanagement of all the resources in the world. And conveniently, they also counted humans as part of that resource pool to manage. Pretty crazy.
Yes. And Rockefeller was the one to create the Trilateral Commission, if I understand correctly.
Yes.
And eventually, through the administration in the US, they were able to put people in power positions, and eventually start changing the world. For example, what they did with China and a lot of other things. Can you speak to that a little?
You bet. Brzezinski and Rockefeller together, they founded the Trilateral Commission. It was kind of like the Beauty and the Beast sort of thing. Brzezinski was the brains and Rockefeller was the brawn, I guess. But when between 1973 and the next election, and when Jimmy Carter came in 1976, the groundwork was laid to pick a president and a vice president to join with the Trilateral Commission. That was Jimmy Carter and Montel as vice president. And when Carter came in to power, Brzezinski was the first guy that he appointed to administration. And together, actually, is mostly Brzezinski chose all the people from the Trilateral Commission to populate the Carter administration. So at one point, you had all the positions, cabinet level positions like Secretary of State, Commerce, etc., the Treasury. They were all held by members of the Trilateral Commission. It was stunning to me back in that day. I was watching this unfold. It's crazy. I didn't know what the Trilateral Commission was at that point, but I thought they were political at that point. This is a political coup, you know, but it wasn't. They were never interested in politics at all, and they said this repeatedly in the press. We had debates with some of these people, members of the Trilateral Commission back in that day, and they told us all the time, "We're not interested in politics." Well, so why do you have all this? Why are you in the politics system here in our country? Why did you hijack our whole political system? Well, they didn't answer that directly at that point, but I know now, looking forward and analyzing, kind of for going back and looking at the forensics of the whole thing, they were not really interested in the political system at all. They were interested to capture the economic engine of the world. At that point, America was everything in the world, and nothing moved anywhere in the world except America was in the middle of it. So what better way to reform or recast or remake the economic system of the world other than to capture the engine of economics activity in the world? And they did. Hands down. Everybody gave them a free pass at that point to do this. And even to this day, I cannot imagine why America would have given them a free pass to do this to us. But nevertheless, what happened in 1974, just after the Trilateral Commission was formed in 73, within 9 months, the language that the commission first adopted, that was their they call it the tagline or the logo line or whatever. They were going to create a new international economic order. That was all over their literature. The new international economic order. Nobody knew what that meant, but nevertheless, that's what they said. We're going to really do this thing right this time. We're going to do a new international economic order. The next year, within 9 months, the United Nations came forward with a general resolution, and it passed at the United Nations. It was 3201, I believe. And the title of this resolution was to establish a new international economic order. There you go. The whole thing was passed off to the United Nations at that point, even within nine months, to get the United Nations to spin up a strategy to take this thing to the world. In other words, the virus was created. Now the system of contagion was hatched through the United Nations to take it everywhere and infect the rest of the world with this ideology, the new international economic order. So, okay, well, then we go forward from there. We see, for instance, in 1992, that was just 20 years after the commission was started, basically, the Rio de Janeiro conference that hatched from the United Nations, that hatched the Sustainable Development / Agenda 21 agenda, that was the agenda for the 21st century. This whole policy was created by the Trilateral Commission, top to bottom, certifiably. There was no There was no input from any idiot at the United Nations. They basically shoved it down their throat, said, this is what you're going to pass. And the rest of history now, all the stuff about the sustainable development goals, all that stuff going forward from there, that was just follow-up stuff. But it was all created in the first place by members of the Trilateral Commission. And I will say that's certified in my mind because the mother of sustainable development was a lady from Norway, Gro Harlem Brundtland. Brundtland was the person that was chosen to run the so-called Brundtland Commission from 1983 to 1987, something like that. And she produced a book. This is a high-level operation at the United Nations, however. She produced a book called Our Common Future. You can still get that the book on Amazon, for instance. And that book became the heartbeat of Agenda 21. And even today, the history books and the United Nations, they look to her as the mother of sustainable development. She was a member of the Trilateral Commission. She wasn't writing this. She didn't write this book for Norway or even Europe, for that matter. She didn't write it because she was a purist or something. She just wanted to do something for planet Earth. No, she crafted that book and the doctrine of sustainable development because she was a member of the Trilateral Commission. How much, how could people miss this? I don't know, but they did. And even now I testify, she wrote the book. Her pen was all over the book. So you even looking forward a little bit more, Maurice Strong was in fact, he was the organizer of that, the Rio conference in the first place. Maurice Strong was all over that thing. He was a member of the Trilateral Commission. Okay, no problem. And there were other members of the Trilateral Commission that participated in that thing. But basically, that was a start to finish project of the Trilateral Commission in the quest to establish a new international economic order.
And how does it work together with the World Economic Forum and before the Club of Rome, which started in 1968, and they had the limits of growth? And I think I saw in one of your interviews that you demonstrate that there is a map putting Greenland together with North America and Mexico all together, which will bring us to maybe speak about the regional government corporational setup, right?
Exactly. This is the Technocracy study course.
This one, yes. Oh my God.
This is the map that they put on the front of the book. This book was published in 1934.
Wow.
This is a rare book. I have a first edition here, by the way. I had to have it. When I saw it, I have to have that book. Yeah. And I read it cover to cover, word for word. But what were they thinking when they created the new this new technate? They called it the North American Technate at that point. What were they thinking? How will all these countries somehow submit to them? See, they didn't have a political system at that point. They couldn't launch any political anything. They didn't have an army. They didn't have any money to buy anything. They had no leverage on these people. But they thought if these people they're going to understand how great we are and how stupid they are, I guess, and they're just going to somehow cave to see that, technocracy is the light of at end of the tunnel, and everybody in North America should be happy to come in to be part of a family, of universal basic income idiots,
Yes.
And so then they never presented any type of a plan to actually make this happen. It just stood in naked form on the cover of their book. Okay, so in America, I'm just saying, it appears that this idea has come into the Trump administration now. I believe it's because technocracy has come into the Trump administration. This idea of the North American technate is being reborn with calls for Greenland, Canada, and Mexico and Central America to
And Panama,
form.
I think, right?
Yeah, yeah. Go figure. It was interesting to me. Some of the mainstream media picked up this image off this book. You can find it pretty easily on you know, go to Google, search for technocracy. You'll find this image. Other ways you can search for images of the map of North American whatever technate. You see this picture.
Mm-hmm.
Some elements of mainstream media who never heard anything about technocracy, didn't have a clue what technocracy was. They picked up this image when President Trump started talking about Canada as first being the 51st state of America, and then talk about Greenland and making that part of America. And somebody in mainstream media pulled this image off of whatever Google somewhere and put this up, not knowing that was the original technate map from the 1930s. It's incredible to me that they just didn't get it but here they are talking about it.
I see. I see all of that like a political, like a dialectical political warfare, and it seems like for many years they were like pushing a lot of lefty agendas, completely insane, and they basically destabilized the society, especially Western civilization, and they were pushing postmodernism and DEI and all this new neo-Marxism and stuff like that. And it seems like eventually the reaction to that is what they bring about through the people who are surrounding Trump today. So
Yeah.
my question is, how do you see it? And do you see that, I mean, does it make sense to say that the technocrats are actually using those other movements of Marxism or communism or all this woke nonsense
Yes.
to establish like their end goal, their end vision?
You bet. I can see it all over the place. And I've said for many years that Marxism is a great destroyer in any flavor, socialism or communism, doesn't matter. Marxism is a great destroyer of society and civilization.
Absolutely.
And I think history pretty much bears this out. There's still a lot of communists around the world and the countries of the world, but nevertheless, this have a very, very failed track record for sure. But the technocrats who thought the economy was going to fold in 1930, by 1934 at least, it didn't fold. So there's no way they would be successful if capitalism could survive on its own. In other words, if it wouldn't collapse by itself, it needed a hefty push off the wall. This is certainly where Marxism became the useful idiots for technocracy. To destroy the fabric, to weaken it, to dumb it down, to destroy the fabric of society to the point that the economic system would just simply collapse at some point, and they would be in then a position to just take over. there's a little bit of a backstory here.
Mm-hmm.
In the 1930s and 40s, there was a large communist movement in America. It organized as well as there was the technocracy movement was organized. And the technocrats hated the communists. The communists hated the technocrats as well. They wrote articles. They didn't go to war like Civil War, but they wrote articles, heated articles about themselves, analyzing critiquing the movements, etc. But you can see if you read any of these articles, just how much the technocrats hated the communists and vice versa. The reason that the Marxists didn't like communism, or excuse me, did not technocracy, because technocracy would remove man from the equation altogether. In other words, the human element of man, the class idea of man,
Mm-hmm.
if the Marxists could not have classes to work with, they're out of business. There's no way they can do that.
Yeah.
They saw that technocracy was going to remove man from the equation altogether and just simply micromanage man from the top down with this hierarchy of engineers and scientists, have nothing to do with anything Marxism could provide. They saw that they were out of business, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I see today this animosity between the Marxist elements and the technocrats, especially. And I think going forward from here, we're going to see that the new broom of technocracy is going to sweep away all of the elements of DEI, cultural Marxism, etc., where it will not be safe for for communists to show their face anymore in society.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see, but that's my prediction at this point. I think we see this broom, the new broom of Trump in America, at least, he's sweeping this all out the door at this point. So the technocrats will be in charge, if they're not already in charge, i.e., we had a coup already, coup d'etat. Even if it's maybe a little bit further down the road, we can see this movement to push the destroyers away and let the economy collapse so that technocracy can take over and do what they wanted to be, what they wanted to do even in 1934, which is basically take over the whole system, top to bottom, appoint technocrats to run everything, and basically get rid of the political system altogether.
I understand. So now we can go to Trump and the people who are surrounding him, like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and all those Silicon Valley gangs. Can you explain this dark enlightenment that Jarvis, if I'm not mistaken, is pushing, and basically to go against everything, all the gifts and fruits of the Enlightenment and liberal societies and freedoms and property rights? Eventually, they just want to get rid of democracy altogether.
Yes.
And to create this new system. And it seems like Trump is being played, or maybe it's his role to play. And can you like speak about those main figures and how they are like leading us to the next step?
It was amazing to me that this business of the dark enlightenment and dark MAGA even got a foothold. But when I think it was in October of last year, when Elon Musk came out on the stage at a rally that Trump had, and he had this hat in his hand. It was a black hat that had the words MAGA on it.
And he said,
And he came
"Dark
out
Mag."
and says, yes, he says, I'm not just MAGA, I'm dark Gothic MAGA.
Yeah. I wonder
And then
if
he put
Mega
it.
is magus or magician. It seems like we are in the, in this circle of a witch, or it's like the magicians. All these
Yes.
narratives, everything is connecting to us being stuck inside some constructed narrative, which eventually leads us to be played by these people.
It seems that way, doesn't it?
Wow, so
But
dark.
here, I'll make an observation between Yarvin and Howard Scott, the original founder of the Technocracy Inc. movement. Scott was a blowhard. He didn't have uh, any scientific chops, so to speak. He wasn't a PhD of any kind. It didn't have that kind of a discipline at all. But he had this social impact thing he had in his mind that somehow technocracy would be useful to change the world. Well, um, fast forward, you have a guy like Howard Scott, who really didn't represent science on one hand because he wasn't a scientist himself, but he was like a wannabe scientist. I, I coined a term just now, a wannabe scientist. Okay, so now you have this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who's proposing a political system that could be wrapped around technocracy to make technocracy successful in the modern context. Curtis Yarvin is first off, he's a technocrat, no doubt about that. But he's from the tech sector in the Silicon Valley. He had significant ties to Peter Thiel along the way. And he has emerged as being a philosopher for the technocracy movement. This is where the Dark Enlightenment was born with Curtis Yarvin. Well, Curtis Yarvin, if you look at his resume and stack it against Howard Scott, there's a lot of similarities. Mm-hmm. Yarvin has no philosophical education at all. He doesn't have a degree in philosophy or a master's or a PhD or whatever. And so he spun this ideology kind of out of thin air, and he is as much a promoter at this point as Howard Scott was in the 30s and 40s and 50s. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. So just saying, the philosophy of the Dark Enlightenment is not a polished system that you can relate to something else. It's not based on the standard people in history that you might take your ideas from. This guy basically said, let's do it this way. And so this is where the Dark Enlightenment came along. And there's justifications he gives for some of the things he suggests. But let me just give you the bottom line. The Dark Enlightenment, number one, he wants to establish a monarchy. A monarch, everybody should understand what a monarch is. A monarch is basically a king, right? You do what he says, or you off with your heads. Mm-hmm. So a monarch, I think probably the big example of that, of a monarch, is King Charles, probably at this point. But Yarvin says we have to get over. This is direct quote. He said, "You have to get over your dictator phobia, and you need to adapt. You have to have a monarch now to replace the democratic or the constitutional republic system that we've had for all these years in America." And by the way, it's just not, when I say constitutional republic in America, it's these people hate all political systems, yours included. And
Mm-hmm.
so, wherever they're politicians, they're going to do away with them. And again, but so anyway, Yarvin says, well, you have to have a monarch, you have to have technocrats running everything. And he said, the way society, the world society should be now is there will be a system of sovereign corporations, he says. Sovereign corporations, that he calls them for short Sovcorps.
Mm-hmm.
And Sovcorps, he says, should be able to own every square foot of planet Earth sovereignly. In other words, the Sovcorp will own all the real estate and all the resources, just like Technocracy wanted to do in the first place. But these sovereign corporations would be able to conduct business with each other if they wanted, or whatever. He gives lots of latitude for it. Doesn't really flesh it out very well how it would really work, but you see this is the basis of regionalism at this point, because the North American technate included from Greenland, Canada, Mexico, United States, Central America, down to Panama.
Mm-hmm.
So this thing would be fleshed out then when, or the end state would be that the Sovcorps will own all the property in the world, period. You will own nothing. Oh, where did I hear that from? The World Economic Forum. Yeah. How did that pop in? What did Klaus Schwab have an early warning on this, you think, maybe? When he said, what, in 2022, somewhere along that way, he said, by 2030, you will own nothing.
And be happy.
That's what he said. And be happy. Oh, happy, yeah. happy.
Of course.
Forget that. Okay. But nevertheless, he said, you will own nothing. Well, all of a sudden, Curtis Yarvin comes along and says the same thing. Philosophically, admittedly, he's a pedestrian philosopher for sure, but this is exactly the same thing. He said, well, when we're done with the Sovcorps to take everything, buy everything up, you will own nothing. You people out there in the world, you'll own nothing, and you'll basically be the serfs of the Sovcorps. You'll be the ownership of the Sovcorps. You personally will be a slave to the Sovcorp, if you will. And some people think this is a great idea. But just imagine, if you know anything, well, I'm sure you have examples in your country that you, commercial companies that you probably would not want to work for. But in our country, there's one company, Amazon, who's very efficient and is run by this technocrat, Jeff Bezos. He's not doing it now, but he set the standard. And you have the micromanagement of everybody in that, all their warehouses that they have. They're so micromanaged to the point that people take bottles with them to work to urinate in, because they can't afford to do a bathroom break. And if somebody slacks off and they're not picking up the speed as quick as they want, well, a buzzer will be sounded, or you'll be written up on the spot. You're not carrying your weight. You're not doing this movement or that movement, whatever, correctly. You're not shipping as many boxes as you should, et cetera, et cetera. And how would you like to have that 24/7 for your living conditions?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
I don't think so. Nobody would want that. Even the people who work for a living there, and God bless them. I mean, they got to have a job. Somebody goes and they get money for it. That's great. But I'll tell you, I don't know anybody who thinks that the country should be run like an Amazon warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
I can't find anybody like that. Maybe there's somebody out there that think that's a great idea, but not me and all my circle of friends, for sure.
I see. Let me ask you, please. I understand, for example, if we take Elon Musk and what he's doing with Dodge, it seems like he's draining the deep state, but instead he's introducing AI and basically privatizing maybe services that people would expect to get from the government, and this
Yes,
is also advancing the plan, the agenda,
this is
right?
it. This is it. This is the plan that's been brewing for a long time, at least since computers came along. But this was you remember, think back again, Technocracy and IBM at Columbia University in 1932.
Yes.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
all of the things that Technocracy said they had to have in place was not possible, but they wrote about it in this book here. They wrote the 7 essential requirements of Technocracy. It was all about data management, keeping a file on everybody, keeping a file of everything that they consumed, everything that they make and they consumed. They only had pencil and paper at that point. They could not do that. There's no way they ever could have done it with pencil and paper, obviously.
Yes.
Even with the tabulators, it would be hard, but they saw the trajectory at that point that someday it'll convert into somehow into a more advanced form of science. It did. And here we are today with computers everywhere and AI everywhere. This is the product. This is the pinnacle. Put it this way: this is the pinnacle of technocratic achievement. And you're going to use it as a sledgehammer against us to capture us all. That's the point. Mm-hmm. Data. This has been a truism for a long time. Data is the new oil. We've heard that phrase, or the new gold. It doesn't matter. But data is the crack cocaine of Silicon Valley. They can't get enough because their AI demands to be fed, and it eats data. If you can't feed it data in increasing quantities, well, it'll die at some point. So they have to have more data always to feed their AI system in order to turn the data around to control the object from which is collected it from in the first place. This is the proposition that they brought to the table with AI. This is the pinnacle of technocratic achievement. And if you look at all the people who have been behind the programming and the development of AI, they're all technocrats at this point. Hardly any of them would say, "Oh, I'm not a technocrat," but they are. They have the same worldview, the mechanistic worldview that they had in the first place to micromanage everything in society, make everything efficient. This is where Elon Musk gets his marching orders, if you will, to come in and reform our government. And yes, when he says from his own lips, he said that his mandate was to reorganize the government of the United States. That's scary to me as a citizen.
Yeah,
but what does he mean?
Unconstitutional and against everything that America stands for. And who
exactly.
Yeah,
it's crazy. But everybody passed on that statement when he said it. I could not believe that somebody would have hollered, "Wait a minute. What do you mean you're going to reorganize our government? How are you going to do that? What it's going to look like when we're done with it?" You see.
Yes.
Well, we have a glimpse already that all of the sensitive data that the government has at this point has been pumped into the cloud and now has a custodian relationship with AI in the cloud, mostly open AI, but also Grok from Elon Musk's organization. And now they say, "Oh, we're gonna get rid of all the waste and the excess positions in government, et cetera. You'll see we're going to get better
We will be
customer
efficient.
service."
Yeah, we will be efficiency instead of freedom. We'll just
That's right.
control everything in a very efficient way.
Yes.
I would
This
like.
is this is going on right under our nose, even as we speak. I've been putting up article after article on technocracy.news describing this coup d'etat that's happening right now. And most Americans don't have a clue what's going on right now.
It's mind blowing and it's so dark. So basically, they were data mining us for a very long time. They have so much information, and now the game changer is with AI. They can actually consolidate all this information and to use it against us to micromanage us in every way and every fashion. So can you speak about this AI world society, and maybe you can break down like what's really going on? Because Trump, for example, how do you call it? Like a president, he went against the CBDC, right? And yet he's supporting Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, and he's speaking about this decentralization. But it seems like eventually we are just moving faster into what you're describing so far. Can you connect the dots with everything
Yes.
about the CBDC, the cryptocurrency, and this AI world society? How it's going to play out?
I'll tell you that's a great question. And one of the first executive orders that Trump signed, I'm not sure. I wouldn't want to stand on the constitutional grounds at this point that he had the right to do that, but nevertheless, he made an executive order and said the central bank, our federal central bank, was not allowed to issue central bank digital currencies.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that as a slap or a shot across the bow that Trump was going to attack the central banks. And I think this is continuing at this point. I don't know how it's going to play out in the end, but you can see this is definitely a slap at the central bank control to do this in the first place. But the problem with central banks is they move very slowly. They have to be. There's no way they can be moving fast. So this might have just been a dodge. Guys, you guys are just too slow over there. We want to have a digital currency, but not the way you want it. We have our own plan, and thank you very much. Get out of here. We'll see you later. Now we'll go after our plan. So you see, one of the first positions that Trump, this is an appointed position, by the way, but he has an AI and crypto czar by the name of David Sachs, one of the
Mm-hmm.
PayPal mafia crowd,
Yes.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
who's head over heels in love with crypto and AI. He's steeped in it. He's one of the movers and shakers of billionaire. And so he knows what he's talking about for sure. But he, as a crypto czar, and other technocrats who were crypto gods, if you will, in the Trump administration, they've been meeting now together with a common agenda to establish a digital system of currency in America and probably for the world as well. I think their sights are well beyond just our borders at this point.
Mhm.
But they're talking about a payment system now that have the same characteristics of a central bank digital currency, but it'll be based on something they have privatized as a solution. Privatized. And what exactly what that would look like, I really don't know at this point, but they're talking about basing it on what's called a class of cryptos called stable coins that don't float, they don't price as wildly as Bitcoin does, for instance. But they're crafting a payment system that could be universal in scope, could transfer money anywhere in the world, um, and most importantly, it will be based on a unique identifier for every person in the society and probably the world at some point.
You're
That
talking
means,
about digital ID, I
yes,
suppose, right? Mhm.
exactly. The digital ID is going to be central to this because even as uh, Augustine Augustine Carstens, head of the central bank, the, the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, the central bank, two central banks. He said, we need to know where you spend your $100 bill and where you spend your 1,000 peso note. We need to know that. this is so technocracy is unbelievable. But it's not going to be the central bank system at this point that will do this. At this point, they've cut away and they're going to create it somehow independently, privatized by some Sovcorp, I'm sure, to use Kerbin Yarvin's idea. Um, and it'll be based on a digital ID, and it will be programmable as well. This
Mhm.
is the really scary part of this. China has already mastered this art of programmable money.
I see.
If they don't like where you're spending your money, well, you're going to be blocked just for spending your money there. In China, this is a punishment. If you step out of line, all of a sudden your options of where you can spend your money just decrease. And this is kind of been the holy grail that technocracy has had from the beginning, even in the 1930s.
Mhm.
If they can track everything that you buy and where you consume it and which is paid for it, then they got everything. This is the this is the philosophy behind the centralized cryptocurrency at this point. It has to be backward. Um, well, I'm in a. It's not backward, but it needs to be. It needs to reach backward into your life to prevent you for misspending your money according to how they see how you should do it in the first place. In other
Mhm.
words, they set the standards. If
Yeah.
they don't like, for instance, if they don't like your carbon footprint, well, you're not going to buy a gas guzzling car, or you're not going to be able to plant a quarter acre of grass on your around your house because that's not sustainable. You use too much water. Doesn't matter. Pick any standard you want. They're going to be micromanage you individually, not as a class, not as a group, not as a family, but you individually. They want to have total control over your spending.
I see. I had the pleasure of speaking with a few Christian friends, and they were very excited to share to me about some ideas. For example, the Bank of Humanity, and what it is all about is about how do you call it, UBI and resource-based economy, and they are not able to recognize the danger. They are actually so excited about it, and they register and push it in their relative countries. Can you please explain to my audience and to them what is the danger in a resource-based economy and UBI?
There is no other resource-based economy in the universe outside of technocracy. There's nothing there. This all sources back to technocracy in the 1930s. That was the original resource-based economic system, and it's still in play today. And there's been nothing that changed along the way to say, well, there's another one. In other words, somebody else invented a resource-based economic system. Look, I'll put this probably pretty bluntly for somebody, but the Ten Commandments, they talk, for instance, the commandment, thou shalt not steal. That speaks of private property, right? How can you steal something
if you don't own anything?
If you don't own anything, there's nothing to steal. Well, okay, so you get this idea that private property, even land ownership, things that you might have like jewelry and your other cars and other things you might have, this is the basis of all society going back to the very beginning of when we didn't have any society at all, just people walking around. But private property has always been the thing that makes society work. Whenever anybody wants to get in the middle of the process of distributing resources for you, you're going to end up in a train wreck eventually, because that's not the way things are supposed to be working in the first place. We don't want anybody micromanage the resources of the world. We have plenty of resources to go around to support life on planet Earth, certifiably so.
Yes.
But when people say, "Oh, water's scarce," "Oh, oil is scarce," or some other thing is the air is polluted or whatever, or the if the virus is going to kill you or whatever, when people start messing with resource allocation, you're off in the weeds automatically. And it's all based on technocracy. Here's another case in point. What does the United Nations say about sustainable development? They talk about resource management. That's what that whole thing is about. Well, that was part and parcel of the new international economic system that was invented by David Rockefeller and Brzezinski in 1973. United Nations, Agenda 21, 2030 Agenda, New Urban Agenda, etc. It's been splattered all over the world at this point. It's a philosophy and as a control system. It's all about control of the resources and you in particular. And the reason this is doubly scary, resources were redefined, natural resources were redefined at Rio de Janeiro in 1992. Very few people picked up on this. We used to think of resources in the world as being the trees in the forest and the crops in the ground and the oil and the gold and the silver, all that kind of stuff. We used to think of resources, right? Well, we kind of want to hang on to our resources. We don't want to be wasteful of resources per se. But when they redefined their concept of resources, it also included us. They
Oh my God.
specifically said that humans are part of that resource pool.
And not to mention that humans are a threat to this earth, right?
Yes,
So we are a resource that need to be managed.
yes,
Hmm, this is so
exactly.
dark.
This is so dark. You're exactly right. It is. We shouldn't even we shouldn't be smiling about this,
Yes,
honestly. You know, when I speak and I'm explaining stuff to people, don't misinterpret my smile as being thinking I'm happy about all this stuff. This
of
is
course not.
so dark and satanic. You just can't believe how dark and evil it is.
Can you kindly say a little bit about the UBI, because I want to be able to explain that to them, the dangers of UBI in a few words.
You bet. UBI will set up a slave class in society from which there will be no escape.
Mhm.
This
Absolutely.
comes from the lips of people like Elon Musk, Sam Altman, um, Peter Thiel, all the tech bros. They all say that AI is going to displace so many workers around the world that there'll be mass unemployment.
Yes.
But they're cynical to say, if you listen to what at the words they're saying, they're talking about a new class of people called the unemployables, not the unemployed. Get this
Wow.
if you can hear what I'm saying here. It's
Yeah.
not the unemployed, it's the unemployables that will never have a job again because they have no skill set whatsoever. And for whatever reason, they will not be able to learn a new skill set to survive in this new economy because as soon as you get one, is be taken away from another AI. Okay,
Yes.
this is a crazy idea that they're intentionally creating a class of people, the unemployables, and those are the people that they want to give the universal basic income to. It's not perhaps you and me that have some job or some way to make a living on our own. No, they want to support this class of unemployables, and that will be, by definition, I guarantee you, that will be the slave class of the future.
Wow.
You will be this will be the useless eaters club. And that has to be managed. Obviously, you can't just pour resources into a dead end crowd of people who can't produce anything for society except just waste and excrement. What are you going to do with them? Well, first, we're going to give them universal basic income. After that,
Who
who
knows? Yeah.
knows? We'll find
Yeah.
some way to get rid of them, maybe early, maybe not a retirement. I mean, all kinds of things come
It's
up.
insane. It's devilish.
Yeah.
Why, in your opinion, the Christians do not understand what's going on? It seems like they are so open to these ideas, and because, of course, they want to benefit with others, equality, all the rest of it. But how come they are not able to discern those dangers, in your opinion?
I wish I knew. I can't give you an answer. Most Christians have their head in the sand, at least in our country. So many churches that, well, let me back up just a minute. When COVID hit, at least 30 to 40% of the churches in America went out of business. Period. They're just not there anymore, and they couldn't come back, and they just disappeared.
But not the abortion centers.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
but now you have so many churches in America who are basically teaching their doctrine from a Bible that's had lots of pages torn out of it, especially with relation to Bible prophecy, for instance. They want to talk about the social aspects of Christianity, taking care of your neighbor and that sort of thing. Well, that's all good, but they have no unified teaching at this point what Bible prophecy is all about.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate to me, because if you had that perspective from the Bible, you'd have an immediate concern that the way things are headed right now towards scientific dictatorship should make sense to you. But
yes.
however the church is taken a U-turn away from Bible prophecy, some churches just flat out say, no, we're not going to talk about Bible prophecy at all. I heard one pastor say it's not profitable even to study Bible prophecy. Really? Well, okay, that's whatever. Yeah, everybody's got an opinion, I'm sure, but if you're going to study something, I figure it doesn't matter what it is, you should study it to the end and read the whole book, for Pete's sake, not just take out certain portions that you don't like.
Yes. I would like to ask if, in your opinion, everything about the pandemic was basically the first major technocratic experiment, and apparently very successful. Would you agree to that?
It really was. It really was. I said the first signs of the pandemic set off my alarms all over the place, that I knew immediately was not about a virus, and it was not about anything that would come after that, the shots included. When I saw all of the scientists and the statistical analysis people coming out to support the narrative, I saw the same people who the month before were promoting the hysteria of global warming,
Climate change.
and climate change. And all of a sudden, they just en masse rolled over onto the COVID bandwagon. And I knew that was a setup from the get-go. It couldn't be anything other than that. It was orchestrated. They had their playbook in place, and they played the part flawlessly. And you say, because they did it. They got the whole world stampeded into these shots that were delivered, which has had untold consequences at this point.
Yes.
All the people that have been injured along the way, all the people who have been died early. It's inconceivable how cruel and sadistic and so much into depopulation these people are, where their head is. I can just hearken back to the Club of Rome's treatise, the limits to growth, where they actually talked about depopulizing the world.
Yes.
Crazy stuff. Who would think that that's a good idea, that you should just wipe out a segment of humanity just because you don't like the way they're consuming the resources, and there won't be enough for us left? Something.
Yeah.
Just absolutely insane.
The COVID and everything, that brings me, for example, to the Virality Project and their attack on the First Amendment and our free speech, which is probably the most important right we have. What do you think about that, and how do you see it plays out later?
Wow. As an American, I was focused for many, many years on the First Amendment we have of our Constitution, so-called our Bill of Rights, where the First Amendment basically says you have the right to free speech and freedom of the press, etc. I've since changed my mind or my attitude towards our First Amendment when I started hearing from people around the world writing to me concerned that their country's shot and somehow they're looking to us to fix this situation. And I heard the cries of the people that free speech is not just something guaranteed by a constitution. Free speech is understood in every society on earth. And it doesn't matter where you go, what kind of people group you're talking about. This is a basic human right that's been given to man, I would say, by a sovereign God, but nevertheless, other people don't say that, but nevertheless, everybody in the world understands innately they yearn for free speech to say what they want to say, whatever's on their mind.
To articulate
So
their ideas, yeah. And it's very
exactly,
dangerous to the system because they don't want you to think. And if God forbid you have an opinion of a dissident, they want to
yes.
silence you so that you're not going to interfere with their agenda.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This has happened countless times over at least 200 years, 250 years, and it's still continuing now. People are being suppressed all over the world in their free speech. England is just a classic example at this point. They've gone
Yes.
over to the dark side,
It's
literally.
insane. Yes.
Just
Yes.
insane, absolutely insane. But at this point, you can see that why the technocrats majored in the science of social engineering. You can see this now, and it's not going to stop at this point. I'm afraid, because the more a free people wants to speak out, the more they're going to be sliced and diced and shut up.
I'm just worried that eventually, if there is no First Amendment, there will be the use of the Second Amendment, and
Yes.
that's going to be very brutal. And I hope it will
Yes.
not come to that. I would like to ask you about how do you call it, transhumanism, and basically how they plan to change the essence of humanity. If you can speak a little about that.
That's a huge topic. Probably it deserves its own show, but
Yes.
nevertheless, we find that the technocrats and transhumanists have joined forces totally at this point. Maybe that wasn't the case in the 1930s, but certainly it is now. Especially when you understand what happened in 2002, when the so-called convergent science industry was created in the universities of the world, where the acronym NBIC was kind of invented at that point. The nanotechnology, information technology, um, cognitive science, and what's the last one? NBIC, computer science, cognitive science. I got it wrong, didn't I? NBIC, nanotechnology, information technology, and neuroscience is in there as well.
Mhm.
But those combinations of scientific departments were produced not so much to have a theoretical scientific impact on the world as it was to make a social impact on the world. And there's been theoretical science generated along the way for sure, but the basic thing you see over and over again, how they want to make a social impact on the world with their science. that's where technocracy and transhumanism merge to produce humans 2.0. This was talked about at the World Economic Forum in just these terms, that the Great Reset was going to be what's going to pop out on the other side of that will be the technocratic world, the system of the world. But humans 2.0 will inhabit this new world. The philosophy was, in Klaus Schwab's mind, and other people like Harari, for instance, said the same thing. Probably he got it from Harari in the first place. But he said, what's the point of putting old people into your new economic system, your new reset system? What's the point of that? Because they blame us for destroying the old world that they're getting rid of. That's what it needs to be reset in the first place. If you get rid of the old world and you just simply put the old people into the new world, what's that going to get you? Just right back in the same place. So they theorized we need a new human 2.0 going into this new reset world. And this is exactly what Harari talked about, technology going under your skin. At the same time, talking about the new world order, the reset world. And this was started, I believe, with the COVID era in earnest, when the virus itself was designed, the payload was the shot in the end. How they convinced almost 3/4 of the world to get these shots, at least one or more shots, that contained a payload that would change your genetic structure potentially and load and into things, other deliverables. We don't know exactly what at this point, but there was some type of other technology that was in these shots. And now you have almost 72% plus of the world has been infected with this whole thing.
Yeah.
This was an expression of humanity 2.0 being born at that point. And it's still continuing today. I just had an article, I haven't posted it yet, I'm certainly going to do it. Canada is experimenting right now with a commercial company to produce an aerosol vaccine that can be distributed by airplane, like crop dusters.
Wow.
It just across a whole population, a city, a town, countryside. These scientists are unplugged at this point. They don't care if you have consent. There's no consent needed for this apparently, but they're in stage 2 of their trials right now. I think stage 3 they'll be approved, and we could possibly see the new class of vaccines are going to be delivered by aircraft.
How they are going to protect themselves from that? They
They don't
themselves.
want to. Apparently, they don't care if they're not protected. They're totally bought into the idea that it's going to be cool to be humans 2.0. It's not going to. This is a suicide wish. I understand that, but they haven't thought any further than the end of their nose. This is really crazy. It really is.
Will you please allow me to ask you 2 or 3 more questions, or your time is? How do you feel?
Let's go for it.
Thank you very much. Beyond losing political freedoms, what does a technocratic world do to our human spirit, our communities, and how we connect with each other? How do you see that?
That's a great question. some people have written and spoken about the anti-human element of technocracy and transhumanism. I believe that myself. It's anti-human. That also means it's antisocial, it's anti-civilization as well. But when I say anti-human, it wants to strip your humanness out of you. It doesn't mean that it can, but I'm just saying that's their goal, to strip what it means to be human. You have certain freedoms as a human being, that, and including the right to communicate with people and be social with people that you choose to be social with. Like if you want to get married, for instance, you fall in love, find a girl likes you, you like her, whatever. You have kids and you have friends, family friends that you might do stuff with, hang out with in the park or something and have a great time. Well, the business of mechanistically drilling into or down into what it means to be human. These technocrats are going to completely shatter that concept of what it means to be human.
Yes.
This is very disturbing. This is the end of this. Maybe some of them don't see the end of it, but the end of it is going to be totally dark, where you cannot maintain relationships with anybody. Maybe only the people that maybe your kids, your brothers and sisters, perhaps. But what it means to be human is to be beyond that, for sure, where you can move around, where you can have some enjoyment in your life. You can choose who you want to love and be associated with. This is not in view with technocracy at all, or transhumanism, not at all. There was a book written in the 50s and 1950s called The Abolition of Man. It was a book by C.S. Lewis, who was a Brit, by the way. He was a Christian apologist and a famous author, for sure. He wrote lots of books, but this particular book was interesting to me. It's called The Abolition of Man. And he surmised very succinctly that when man drills down into nature, doesn't matter how deep man goes, to the molecule level, to the atomic level, to the subatomic level, it doesn't matter how much you drill down into nature. What happens is, not only can you not arrive at any conclusions about life itself, but he surmises that as you drill into nature, that you're not conquering nature, but rather nature is conquering you. And he said the end of that process will be the abolition of man. It's a great book. I encourage everybody to get a copy of it. You find it online. It's all over the place on PDF form. Get the book and just check it out, and you might resonate with it or maybe not. But it really spoke to me where this whole thing is headed. It'll be the end of what we know to be human, and in a generic sense, it'll be the abolishment of mankind. Even if there's humans walking around, it'll be the abolishment of humanness.
I understand. My last question, if I may. All these challenges ahead of us, what should we pay attention to like what to pay attention to so we can recognize great dangers, especially in the next 20 years. I suppose that we are going to see major moves until the year of 2045, perhaps, when the UN will be 100 years old. So what to pay attention to, and also what kind of solutions do we have? How can we resist?
You bet. Pay attention to AI for sure, artificial intelligence. That's an oxymoron, number one.
Hmm.
There's no such thing as artificial intelligence. They've coined that word. It didn't mean anything at the time, but it's a bad way to phrase it. Nevertheless, it's very powerful today and is able to run whole departments of companies or whole departments of government, even whole societies. Um,
If you allow me
and
for a second, I think they are
yes,
already doing it with OpenAI government, right?
you're right. You're
Yeah.
right. This is the embryonic stage. You see, we're still at the forefront of this whole thing with AI. I believe personally that there's some iteration of artificial general intelligence working even now, but it's not mature yet. It's like when a baby gets born, it can't do hardly anything. It wiggle around and poop and giggle and cry, right, right.
Yes.
Nevertheless, it's a human being, right?
Yeah.
So I believe AGI has been born in that sense, but it's still in an infant stage, and it'll progress to be a toddler, and then a young person, a teenager, and so on. It'll progress that way. We'll certainly get to the point of ASI, that's super intelligence at some point. Again, that's going to be an oxymoron itself. But aside from the control factor that AI wants to put on us, whether it's crypto, government services, um, the approval or denial of anything on society that you should or shouldn't have, etc. The biggest, well, my fear, the biggest thing that people should be concerned with, that the concept of an AI God is right before us. It's being talked about in Silicon Valley now in these terms. There will be an AI God that will be omniscient, omnipresent, probably all powerful as well. And nobody in society will understand how omniscient this God is, because it knows everything. They think it knows everything. In that sense, you can see a thread if you think back where C.S. Lewis was kind of talking about, and other people in the last century, like Francis Schaeffer was talking about. You see this concept of the kind of the Tower of Babel is being recreated, where this new God that is not God, but it just acts like God, and their mind will be sufficient to replace whatever thing they think God is in the first place. And at that point, the philosophy of scientism of Henri de Saint-Simon gets completed, where there is literally a priesthood of scientists and engineers who will look to the God, the AI God, for instructions. And God help us if if we're subject to the AI God, because there will be, by definition, there will be no mercy with this God. There will be no grace with this God.
Yes.
You get
Before
my
you,
point.
of course, before you tell me a little bit about how we can resist, what about the theosophical organizations, especially in the UN? How does it connect to the technocratic agenda? Are they also some kind of useful idiots to merge religions to support technocratic agenda?
Are you talking about the United Nations?
Yeah, because for example, you have the Lucius Trust and the
Uh,
theosophical philosophy,
yeah, yeah.
which is like, do you see any connection here? Just if I may.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can see connections all over the place. If you look in that direction, especially where religion is concerned, you'll find all kinds of connections, and it dovetails. And I have to say, back in the 30s, if you asked them, are you religious somehow? Is this a religion you're doing? No, we don't have anything to do with religion whatsoever. Uh, but they're mostly talking about Christianity, not any other religion of the world. But they were irreligious for sure.
Hmm.
Um, most of them will say that today as well, probably. However, this business of AI God has got a lot of them spooked, honestly. So they're when I say spooked, they're going to be shocked out of their atheism into believing into this new God, the AI God.
I see. So how can we resist? What can any ideas, any effective ways that you can point out to, other than of course inviting you all over the world and supporting your work?
I'm going to be the last man standing at this point, if necessary. I've seen it from beginning to end, and that makes me kind of an eyewitness to the whole thing, to the whole parade. Um, Number one, don't ever play a role that somebody else assigns to you. From this day forward, if you see it coming, don't play. Just dig your heels in. Say, no, I'm not going to do this. Forget it. Get out of my face. And if it costs you something, be ready to pay the price.
Yes.
Let me give an example. When they told me that I had to wear a mask to protect me and everybody else from catching COVID, and social distancing that was part of it too. When
Hmm.
they told me to wear a mask, and I understood already what was all this whole thing was about, it wasn't about the virus at all. I said, I'm not going to wear a mask. I don't care what you do with me or whatever. I will not wear that mask. And you just can crucify me if you want to. I'm not going to wear the mask. And I never did. But it cost me. I couldn't go into restaurants that I wanted to go to, and certain stores I couldn't go into at all. And most importantly, I could not fly. I had to give up my a right to fly because you couldn't get on an airplane without a mask on, right?
Yes.
So it cost me something. I paid that. I decided at the first time I'm going to pay that price to maintain my freedom. Everybody at this point should take a lesson from that.
Uh,
Don't
uh,
get suckered into playing a role again. And whatever you see, whenever you see something coming at you, dig your heels in. You can figure it out later if you have to. Maybe you need to recant or something later, but you can always say no or yes later. Dig your heels in, say no, and from the get go, I'm not going to play your stupid game again.
yes.
That's one thing.
Yes.
That's a mindset thing. If you're not willing to pay the cost, just don't play. I mean, at that point, you're going to be captured.
Yes.
That's number one.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, if you understand the truth and you do not uh, spread it around, telling other people, there will be blood on your hands now.
I agree.
I'm sorry to tell this to people, but anybody who have listened to what we just discussed for this 2 hours, oh my gosh, almost 2
Thank
hours.
you. Thank you.
Okay, listen, people. If you have consumed this podcast or however you get it, and if you turn away from it and say, I don't want any part of this. I think a guy's nuts. I don't believe him or whatever, or you do believe me and you hide your head in the sand. Listen, there's going to be blood on your hands by not telling people what's going on.
Yes.
We have to do that. If you love mankind, maybe you hate mankind, I don't know. But there's got to be somebody in your life that you have a respect for and you love. Tell them the truth, what's going on, so that they can also at least hide from the danger, perhaps in some way going forward. And you need to be politically sensitive for all the leaders that you've elected or however they got over you. The people that are supposedly being your caregivers in society, you expect your elected politicians to take care of you. At least get the enemy off my back, so he stopped shooting at me or whatever. You want some type of protection from your government. They're not protecting you, friends. Not it. There's no government in the
That if
world
the
today.
government is not captured already, unfortunately.
That's exactly right. They're not on your side at this point, and except that you do something to wise them up individually. If you know somebody in government personally, maybe it's a maybe an uncle or something. Go to them and look. Say to them, look, you got a problem here. You need to be aware of what's going on so that you can take some steps to protect us people out here in society from not getting captured as well. This is going to be an important role for people going forward. You have to open your mouth at this point. There's no other way.
I agree with you. I would like to ask, kindly tell my audience how they can find your work and how they can support you. And
You
also
bet.
maybe you can speak about your new book a little bit.
Well, you bet. I can be found at technocracy.news. I have a premium membership there that can support me and also give you access to all, oh my gosh, of the 6,700 articles I have cataloged and indexed on the website at this point. It's an amazing treasure trove of information on technocracy and transhumanism. There's also other resources that you can have access to. I have a Technocracy boot camp there. That's a separate product you can buy. It's an e-learning course. It will give you everything you need to know in probably about 20 hours of study, and that's a great way to get introduced if you're late to the party and you haven't read articles along the way. That's a good way to get into the nits and grits of it. I also have a Substack account, patrickwood.substack.com as well, that I use for other topics, sometimes not necessarily relating to technocracy, but sometimes it does. But that's my outlet for my rants, I guess, or whatever,
That's fantastic.
So that's a subscription thing also, but I always release lots of stuff, free stuff along the way as well. So, whatever people want to do, I always leave articles up for at least four days on Technocracy News before they go behind the paywall. So nobody can complain that I'm not hiding anything from anybody. You can see it in plain sight. You can download it. You can listen to the audio track. You can print it, whatever you want to do, and share it with people. But I'm trying to protect the large body of my work by keeping it behind a paywall.
Of course. My dear sir, I would like to thank you with all my heart and to bless you for all that you're doing. It's absolutely amazing. Really, thank you so much.
My pleasure indeed.
So with your permission, I will end the recording and kindly wait with me for a second, okay?
You bet.
Thank you very much.